back in the spotlight, so let's go back and talk about what actually happened and how did we get to tomorrow's court hearing. Phala Phala is the name of President Cyril Ramaphosa's private game farm in Limpopo, and in February 2020, a group of men broke into the main lodge. According to what later emerged, the group of men find and steal what is a large sum of foreign currency, US dollars specifically, that was hidden inside of a couch. According to some reports, it was estimated to be about 4 million US dollars that was stolen, which is the equivalent of 75 million rand at that time. Ramaphosa, though, states that it was about 580,000 US dollars and not 4 million, but that discrepancy already on its own tells us that this story goes deeper than most of us actually know. According to President Ramaphosa, he says that this money was a transaction for the sale of game, which he sold to a Sudanese businessman. But we'll get back to the Sudanese businessman. So now the story starts to get really murky from this point, because instead of going to the police and reporting a break-in and theft, Ramaphosa instead gave the task of finding out what happened and investigating this theft directly to the presidential head of protection, General Wally Road, which has rightfully stirred up a lot of conversations, because General Wally Road, his job is to protect the president's body, not to investigate or play private detective into his personal affairs, especially of this nature. Instead, you have the most powerful man in the country using his security apprentice to investigate a crime which took place on his private property, instead of going to the police and informing the public, informing police, informing parliament of what has occurred on his private property. Which led to many people asking if this was a legitimate game transaction, why the secrecy around it? Why not go directly to law enforcement and the authorities and explain that money has been stolen from your property? And many critics say it's because the money itself raises more questions than the actual theft. Now, Rhodes' secret investigation traced the money back to Namibia. Suspects were identified, but it becomes a lot more tricky because some of the suspects were linked to Namibian political figures. These individuals were connected to the SWAPO ruling party and some of the political figures who are in leadership at the time. And because of this, a central part of the case became the domestic worker that was working on the Phala Phala farm at the time, who was Namibian. Now, according to the reports, allegedly the suspects were apprehended and some of the money was retrieved. However, it is still very sketchy because no South African law enforcement were involved in apprehending the suspects or in the retrievement of the stolen money. There was no formal record, there was no docket, there was no case number, and after the money was retrieved, it just went silent, and it was silent for 2 years. Fast forward now 2 years later, in June 2022, the state security boss, Arthur Fraser, goes into a police station and opens up a criminal case against President Cyril Ramaphosa.
The important issue for us is that we want to register as members of the African National Congress and as members of South African society our outrage at the crimes that President Ramaphosa committed.
So Fraser goes into a police station in Pretoria and he tells the officers that Ramaphosa kidnapped and interrogated Namibians on African soil to conceal and cover up theft on his property of large sums of money, and bribed these individuals to not say anything, concealing the matter, which borderline plays off of money laundering. And this was a serious matter because Fraser's allegations were on unlawful detention, defeating the ends of justice, money laundering, and the violation of South Africa's Reserve Bank exchange rate regulations because the money was never declared. I remember when I told you to keep the Sudanese businessman in mind. Let's bring him to the forefront of the conversation. His name is Hazim Mustafa, and according to Cyril Ramaphosa, he came and bought game, specifically buffaloes, from Cyril on the land. According to Ramaphosa's version of the story, Mustafa came, he bought the buffaloes, the money was kept on the property awaiting processing, and then it was stolen before it could be banked. Simple. Except journalists and investigators started digging in and asking more questions. Was the buffalo sale declared to SARS? Were the foreign exchange proceeds that were received declared to the Reserve Bank? And because in South Africa you cannot just hold millions of foreign currency without declaring it because it violates exchange regulations, acts within the banks. This, regardless of how legitimate the transaction might have been, the act of holding on to millions for a long period of time without declaring is illegal. And Ramaphosa noted that, and he said that it was an oversight on the farm's manager's side, and that's why it took so long to be declared. Fraser's complaint, coupled with the pressure of South Africa, Parliament had to take a step, and under Section 89 of the Constitution, Parliament is allowed to remove a president for serious misconduct or violation of the Constitution. So an independent panel was established to handle this matter, and it was headed by Sandile Ngcobo. Ngcobo panel released their report in November of 2022, and it was devastating. So the panel found that there was prima facie evidence, which is basically enough evidence to say that at the face of it, Ramaphosa did violate the Constitution. He committed misconduct, and he may have even violated anti-corruption laws, as well as deliberately delayed and compromised the investigation of theft. The panel recommended that Parliament proceed with initiating the formal process of impeachment under Section 89 of the Constitution. Ramaphosa then went to the Constitution Court to challenge this process. And then in a move that stunned political observers, he announced that he would be resigning. The ANC then held its National Executive Committee meeting, and they had to then decide, would they be backing their anti-corruption president, or would they be removing him? And they stood and chose to stand beside him and stick beside their man and defend him. So now, because he had the support of the ANC's NEC, he decided to withdraw his Constitutional Court case and his resignation. And he then agreed to appear before the Section 89 Parliamentary Committee. Because at the time the ANC was the majority, it basically watered down the committee process, which left a lot of observers in the public, political critics as well, feeling unsatisfied with whether justice will prevail and if he will be held to account. The matter eventually made its way to the Constitutional Court, who then is going to decide whether the parliamentary committee proceedings were sound. It'll also look onto if Ramaphosa's conduct was a violation of the Constitutional Court, as well as his own office as president, and if overall, if Parliament handled the matter accurately. And tomorrow we'll be hearing more from the court about their findings. I'm Maluleke, and this is IOL. Stay tuned for more updates.